There's been some naughty behavior in the knitting community, and we are now in a moment of reckoning. Back in January, a high-profile white knitting blogger excitedly posted about an upcoming trip to India, saying it would be like going to Mars, and writing, "If I can go to India, I can do anything." Some commenters called her out for exoticizing a foreign culture, which led to some fragile white knitters clutching their pearls. This precipitating incident has knitters taking a hard look at inclusion and representation. Do fiber artists have the moral fiber to address racism within their community? Joining us today is Felicia Eve, owner of the Park Slope Yarn Shop and community space String Thing Studio. Welcome to Woman to BK.
Thank you.
So when I've told people that we're doing a segment on racist knitting, or I've told them about this kerfuffle, most people think I'm joking or are incredulous about it. Why do you think that is? Why do people have such a hard time with this?
The idea that racism in knitting is just like, well, that's like a sacred place. Like, this is supposed to be a happy thing. Like, why would that come up? And as a woman of color, I say to people all the time, I was just like, well, you know, the knitters here live in the United States, and our current temperature is very, hot right now for racial, cultural things of that nature. And the people who knit are part of that culture too. They're part of the United States. So
absolutely, racism touches
everything. Everywhere.
Some people took this original poster to task, and I believe that she ended up responding well, ultimately, after a few posts of like, I don't understand
what the problem is exactly, which I think is what really turned people off. Like, as a woman of color, I read the post, and to be honest, my first response was just like, this is a white woman who clearly has no brown or black friend. And it was not people of color who were taking her to task at that point. It was white women who were coming for her hard, like, how dare you, how insensitive. I mean, and it kind of went on. And you're right. Her first response was, I don't get it. Like, you shouldn't be upset about it, which is when it really took that sharp turn, and she figured out, or somebody called her and was just like, you need to backpedal fast and come up with a different response. And she did. And she ultimately, found somebody to educate her, and she went there. But by that time, it was the train had left the station. So it became a whole process of education, which ends up falling on people of color to do that work, which is a lot.
Right. It's a form of emotional labor.
Absolutely.
And educating gets
constantly.
old.
That's one of my favorite lines. Like, you teach people how to treat you, right? But that is a constant thing every single day.
Had you experienced racism within the knitting community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give me maybe an example from your personal life?
I know. I can say a few years ago, this is before I opened my yarn shop, Vogue Knitting Live, which you'll know as a knitter, is like this big convention, basically, that takes place in New York City at the end of January every year. And this particular year, two girlfriends of mine who come from out of town, I call each other our knitting friends. I'll use the proper term, the nice term that we call each other, but we do a lot of traveling for knitting. So they came to town, and we went to the festival, and we did some shopping there. And at one of the booths that we shopped at, we were given a coupon to go to a local yarn shop. So this time we went to a yarn shop that we had never been to before, and we had the coupons. It was one of a few different shops, but it wasn't the only reason we were going was because we had a coupon. So we went in, each of us were shopping. We had asked some questions. We were vaguely, greeted, if you could call it that, but again, something we were used to didn't prevent us from doing what we would normally do.
Sure.
And we had asked a few different questions, and the responses were tart, like, oh, yeah, no, you can't do X, and that's it, And in fact, one point, she was encouraging us to go someplace else to buy the same thing. Oh, well, they have the same thing at blah, blah, blah place. I don't mind if you go buy it someplace else.
That seems like not normal business owner
behavior. Not for a retail store. No, not when you're like, well, I know I have it, but so-and-so has it. I'll be happy if you go someplace else and buy it.
Right,
No,
how generous
not normal.
For your competitor.
Right,
Yeah.
So, and then ultimately when we got to the cash register, now each of us has at least $100 a piece. In my yarn shop, if you have $300 worth of stuff that you're purchasing at a yarn shop, I'm happy. What do you need? You need water.
Exactly.
Yeah. You need me to rub your feet. Like, what's the deal? But my friend said, oh, don't forget, we have the coupon, which all of us are just doing our thing. And I was just like, oh, yeah, you're right. And the response from the woman was, oh, so that's why you're here. And we were like, wow, if we really didn't want this yarn, we wouldn't buy it. The people were like, I would have put that yarn on. I never would have bought it. But we bought it. And as we were walking out, my friends were like, nice place, never going back there again.
Right.
And, we haven't. We didn't go back. But you hear stories of people who every single time, they've been to different stores, people assume you don't knit because you were Black. I have a friend who had on a beautiful knitted sweater that she had made, and she was away at a hotel or something, and in the lobby, and this mother-daughter were there, and they complimented her on the sweater. That's beautiful. And she says, well, thank you. I knitted it. And they were like, well, no, the mother and the daughter immediately was trying to reel the mom in.
Right.
But
Mom,
the mother
cool, not
was
a good
going
look.
there. No, she couldn't. She was on her way, and she was determined to say, well, I didn't know that they knit. And she said that I didn't know that they knit.
Wow.
And made the assumption that somebody must have knitted, but it couldn't have been you, So it's
Right.
that level of ignorance, and the fact that you're not able to stop yourself, that you can think it. We all have thoughts. We have a running thing in our head. But she was very intent on letting her know that she didn't necessarily believe that she had made that sweater.
I think it's shocking because we keep on finding new ways to see the racism that exists in our world. Right. There are some things where it's that old trope, that's expected, that's tired. Can't you come up with a new way to be racist? And it's oh, wait, you are coming up with new ways to be racist.
Yeah.
Black people don't knit?
Yes.
That's
There
shocking.
was even a comment, I remember when I really had to stop reading them, there was a comment from a white woman who said, well, is it cultural appropriation if Black people knit?
Oh, my God.
Because this is a white craft. Do your history research. This is not, first people that were doing this was in Egypt, and as many people would like to take Egypt out of Africa, they can't.
That's right.
That's where it is.
Right. Put your blonde Cleopatras away.
Yeah.
Egypt's in Africa.
Let's just deal with facts. So
tell me a little bit about your decision to open up your own yarn store. Were you thinking at all about the desire to create a safe and welcoming space?
that was definitely part of it. I mean, that's kind of who we are. I wanted a yarn shop that felt like it was an extension of my home. You didn't have to even know how to knit when you came in. Anything creative is welcome at Strengthening Studio. So that's one of the reasons why it's not called Strengthening Studio Yarn Shop. It's just called Studio. That was a conscious decision. Strengthening came out of the fact that it's all about the yarn. I'm a confess yarn snob. But it really is about the string,
So I feel like we're in a bit of a moment where people are more aware of how and where they spend their money. And, Black-owned businesses in Brooklyn, we have a long history of them, but I think that people, once again, are trying to make sure that they spend their money within the community. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, about being part of this new wave of Black businesses?
Yeah.
And if you've been met with with any skepticism. I remember one quote that I saw of yours where you were we've had a Black man as president. Why is it so hard to believe that a Black woman owns a knitting shop in Park Slope?
Well, that's part of this whole conversation of race, right? So people come in and assume that my white employees are the owner of the shop and not me. People making assumptions, how that works. And you get I call it the double O. So it's like, oh, you have beautiful yarn, they'll say to my employee, and they go, oh, well, thank you, but Felicia's the owner, and they go, oh, the double O.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wait, well, or my favorite line is, well, welcome to the neighborhood. And I'm like, thanks, but I've lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. And they're like, oh. Overwhelmingly, we have been embraced. I fill a spot that was needed, I think. I think people want to see themselves, for multiple reasons. I had a woman call us from a school. They were doing a field trip with their kids, and it was Black History Month, and they wanted to bring them to my shop because it was owned by a Black woman, which is amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us, Felicia.
Thank you.